Welcome back once again to the bright side. We've been talking nitric oxide and its relevance to good health. Nitric oxide is one of the key players in wellness and longevity and anti-aging and healing. If you have an inflammatory or degenerative health crisis, chances are you've got a nitric oxide problem. Deficiencies are common. Nitric oxide deficiencies may be one of the hidden causes of diseases. At least it's a contributing, more than likely a contributing factor to degenerative disease. In my opinion, anything you can do to increase nitric oxide production, to increase nitric oxide availability is going to be in our health interest. And there's lots of ways to do it. Exercise will bump up nitric oxide levels, and conversely, so can relaxation. Getting enough sleep can be a great way to bump up your nitric oxide levels. And then there's the whole subject of nitrate and nitrite. Nitrates and nitrites and their connection to boosting nitric oxide. And how do we get nitrates and nitrites into our body to boost nitric oxide levels? Well, we eat them. We eat nitrates and we eat nitrites. Yes, much of the nitric oxide in the body is derived from ingested nitrites and nitrates. And these nitrites and nitrates are some of the most important of all nutritional compounds that are found in vegetables. And even though you don't hear a lot about them, at least in a positive way, you hear a lot of negative stuff about nitrates and nitrites, but in terms of their positive or health benefits, unless you're an athlete, we'll talk about this here in a little bit, unless you're an athlete, you don't hear a lot about the benefits of nitrates and nitrites. Nitrates and nitrites are thought to be responsible for the anti-aging and health benefits associated with eating vegetables and eating a plant-based diet, especially when it comes to the brain and the circulatory system. But there's a lot of controversy about nitrates and nitrites. So let's talk a little bit about the controversy of these surrounding these really important nitrogen compounds, nitrates and nitrites. First of all, nitrates and nitrites are very similar. Nitrites, I-T-E, nitrites, are the active form of nitrates. Nitrates are a more stabilized version. So nitrates and nitrites, they're kind of the same thing, except for nitrites are the active form. Nitrites are really the supposed bad guy when it comes to nitrate-nitrite chemistry. If you started learning and understanding nutrition in the 1970s and 1980s like I did, and even perhaps more recently, you've probably heard this idea, this meme, this belief about nitrates and nitrites being some kind of toxic element or cancer-causing compound that's somehow best avoided. A month ago, someone wrote a piece about the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, an anonymous author. We talked about it. This guy's showed up on beforeitsnews.com. It was kind of a hit piece about the Beyond Tangy Tangerine. This guy supposedly had it tested in some lab in Switzerland, and leaving aside the dubious nature of this guy's claims, the point I want to make is that one of his points about the Beyond Tangy Tangerine being toxic was the fact that it had nitrates in it. Ooh, it had nitrates. That's one of the reasons he said the Beyond Tangy Tangerine was toxic. Well, if you understand anything about nutrition or chemistry, it should come as no surprise that the Beyond Tangy Tangerine has nitrates, because it's plant-derived, or at least partially plant-derived. Plant-derived minerals are going to have nitrates because nitrates are part of the soil. Nitrates are a constituent of normal soil. This is one of the things that bacteria do. Soil bacteria make nitrates, and then the plants use these nitrates. Nitrates are an important part of our health, and they're an important part of plant health as well. And the idea that these compounds, these nitrates, nitrites, are bad, quote, bad chemicals in some way is really silly and simplistic. And if you ever hear anyone saying this, you can consider it a sign that there's probably some biochemical ignorance going on. So anyway, if you followed conventional wisdom, doctor wisdom, mainstream health ideas for the last 30 or 40 years, you've heard that nitrates and nitrites are somehow problematic. That's because for the last decade or two, there's been a steady drumbeat coming out of government organizations and the medical model in general that you have to avoid these compounds. But unfortunately, as with most conventional wisdom, that's not exactly correct. Nitrates and nitrites are critical parts of the biochemical health machine system that we call the human body. They're critical elements of soil itself. However, nitrates and nitrites, these simple little molecular structures, they're just a little piece of nitrogen and a little piece of oxygen. They can be, like all powerful elements, there's a dark side There's a good side and there's a bad side. Nitrogen kicks butt. Nitrogen is explosive stuff. We've talked about this a lot. Nitrogen is powerful, and its power can be used to kill things. Last week we talked about how the body uses nitrogen to kill viruses and bacteria in the form of nitric oxide. Anyway, nitric oxide kills pathogens. Nitrogen's a high-energy compound, and that makes it potentially explosive. Nitroglycerin, TNT. These are all nitrogen forms of nitrogen that are explosive. And so nitrogen can kill things. Nitrogen can kill microbes, and nitrogen can react with things. By the way, this is why nitrates and nitrates are used as preservatives. They kill mold, they kill bacteria in meats. Meats are perishable, they're prone to microbial contamination, and nitrites and nitrites are used to kill bacteria and fungus and molds, etc. in meats. Thus the problem with nitrates and nitrites. They're powerful, but that doesn't necessarily translate to dangerous. And in the body, in addition to the fact that nitrates and nitrites are carriers of this super duper important element, nitrogen, the prime building element in the body, nitrates and nitrates are also precursors or raw materials for the incredibly all-important nitric oxide. Now, the fact that nitrogen and nitrates are so powerful, it means that they can react with things. And this is where the problems come from. They have a dark side because they're so powerful and they're so reactive. They can readily react with other substances. Most significantly, nitrates and nitrates can react with protein. And this is where some of the problem and even some of the misunderstanding comes from about how important or how dangerous nitrates and nitrites can be. And I'll tell you what I mean when we come back from our break. Also take your phone calls. 844-236-6010 is our number. I'm Pharmacist Ben. You're listening to The Bright Side. We'll be back after this. Senators ask FDA for national investigation of dietary supplements. This all follows the story was in the news a couple of weeks ago about the New York State Attorney General checking out herbal supplements. GNC, Target, Walmart, Walgreens apparently have carry supplements, herbal supplements on their shelves that weren't what they say they were, and they were filled with they had fillers and excipients, didn't have the active ingredients, etc. And now you got the senators wanting to do an investigation not on herbal supplements. Famous Senator Dick Durbin here, not a friend of the public, has now collapsed, and I knew this was going to happen, collapsed herbal supplements with nutritional supplements using the phrase dietary supplements. This is a sneaky little backdoor into restricting or regulating nutritional supplements, in my opinion. See how they do this little trick? They combine nutritional supplements with herbal supplements, and they tell you how problematic herbal supplements are, and then they collapse them into the subject of nutritional supplements by calling everything dietary supplements. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. I had a feeling that was going to happen when I heard this article. In any case, now senators want to regulate all dietary supplements based on these fraudulent herbal supplements. Folks, herbal supplements are not nutritional supplements, and it's very important we make this distinction. All right. Let's see, 844-236-6010 is our number. We got lines open for you. We'll get to our calls here in just a minute. Try to call in early if you have questions about health, nutrition, or prescription drugs, or, of course, the longevity products. If you want to purchase any of the longevity products or join the Brightside Ben team, you can call the Brightside Ben phone team at 866-735-2470. Okay, so the problem with nitrates and nitrites is they're powerful and they're reactive. But that's also the good stuff. Nitrates and nitrites are powerful. They're sources of they're raw materials for producing nitric oxide, and as it turns out, nitrites and nitrates are also performance enhancing. They're energizing. Athletes are starting to understand how important these substances are, and we'll get to this probably tomorrow. We'll talk about the importance of nitrates and nitrates for athletic performance, or as they say, ergogenics, which is the science of athletic performance. And anytime something is ergogenically valid or has ergogenic benefits, it's going to have benefits for all of us. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So in any case, nitrogen by itself, or nitrogen, whether it appears in the form of nitrates and nitrites, is super duper powerful stuff, but these nitrites and nitrates are reactive, and this is where the problem comes from. Nitrates and nitrates can react, especially when they're heated, they can react with proteins in foods, or they can react with proteins in the body to form something called nitrosamines. And nitrosamines are not good. Nitrosamines are very problematic, and they are carcinogenic. Back in the 1970s, there were some studies that showed that when you eat cooked meat, especially bacon, that had nitrates and nitrates in them, and you were cooking the meat, frying the meat at high temperatures, nitrosamines were formed. And so a theory was hatched that ingestion of nitrates and nitrites via the formation of these cancer-causing compounds may be related to the incidences or increased incidence of colon cancer as well as stomach cancer. And then this idea was further locked into the cultural mindset when it was shown that bacon was especially high in nitrosamines after it was fried. And in short order, the government mandated a reduction in the amount of nitrates that could be used in various foods. Later on, some studies came out that linked nitrite-infused water to cancer in rats, and pretty much from then on, the assumption was made, at least among lay people and even among government authorities, that nitrates and nitrites equal cancer, at least ingestion of nitrates and nitrites equal cancer. As I say, one of the main sources of these kinds of chemical compounds is processed meat products, sausages, hot dogs, bologna. In fact, nitrates and nitrates are pretty much the most powerful of all food preservatives. And because meat, which is really decaying flesh, ultimately, that's what it is, meat is a perfect source of nutrition for bacteria and for mold and for microbes. Everything likes the high protein content of meat. So the meat industry is highly dependent on nitrates and nitrates, these powerful preservatives. It would be very difficult to have hot dogs and hamburgers. It would be very difficult to make and sell these kinds of processed meat foods without nitrate preservatives. Tens of billions of dollars worth of food per year contain nitrites and nitrates as preservatives. It's big business. Nitrates and nitrates are a must-have for the processed meat industry. And statistical analysis has shown that eating a lot of processed meat is indeed associated with cancer. So is this really related to the nitrates and the nitrites? We don't know. Processed meat is nasty food anyway, and perhaps it's the processing in the meat, not the nitrates and the nitrates that are causing the cancer. We don't really know, but the fact that nitrates and nitrates are found everywhere, they're among the most ubiquitous compounds in nature, and they're part of the soil, they're part of bacterial processing, they're part of plants. Plants require them for their growth. Plants require them to make phytonutrients. It's hard to believe that nitrates and nitrates are indeed that problematic. What's more, nitrates and nitrites are found everywhere in our bodies. They're found in all our tissues. They're found in all our cells naturally. They're pretty much found everywhere. It's how nitric oxide is made. And scientists who understand the importance of nitrates and nitrites as part of good health refer to something called the nitrate-nitrite-nitric oxide pathway. Scientists, biochemists understand that nitric oxide comes from nitrates and nitrites. These nitrates and nitrites are essentially storage pools of nitrogen. They represent sources of nitrogen, and nitrogen is incredibly important. They represent storage pools or reservoirs for the manufacture of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is very unstable stuff. It's only around for a second or two. So keeping a pool of nitrogen available for making nitric oxide is very, very important. And as it turns out, by the way, one of the major sources of nitrates and nitrites in the body is not from preservatives. It's from our own saliva. Bacteria in our mouth actually convert nitrates into nitrites, and this whole nitrate-nitrite chemistry goes on in our own spit, in our own saliva. Human breast milk is another major source of nitrates and nitrites. Why do you think that would be? Well, they're sources of nitrogen. Nitrogen is important for growth. Nitrogen is important as a source of nitric oxide. It's important for building, and building is breast milk's main job, and building is a baby's main job. Babies are born with premature immune systems, premature digestive systems. Babies are in constant building mode, and nitrogen compounds, as well as nitric oxide, nitrates, nitric oxide. These are all key players in keeping babies building and growing. They're also key players in keeping baby protected from germs and viruses. Remember, nitric oxide is antimicrobial. It's antiviral. If pregnant and nursing women, if women are pregnant and nursing, they would be very smart to actually increase their nitrates and nitrites in the diet. If you're pregnant, you want to make sure you're getting enough nitrates and nitrogen in general in your diet. I'll tell you how you do that here in a minute. Actually, we'll tell you about that tomorrow. We're going to take our phone calls here. Tomorrow we'll continue talking about about how you increase nitrates and nitrites. And we'll talk about the athletic performance enhancing properties of nitrates and nitrites. Athletes are now starting to understand that nitrates and nitrites are important for helping improve athletic performance. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to just take nitrates and nitrites into your system. I'll tell you what I mean as we continue talking about this very, very important subject of nitrogen, nitric oxide, nitrates, and nitrites on the bright side tomorrow. Time to hit our phones. Oh, there's the music. I'm sorry. I was going to hit the phones. We'll get to your calls when we come back from our break. 844-236-6010 is our number. Got a line open for you. We'll be back on the bright side right after this. Let's go to Michigan, I believe. I think it's Michigan. John, what's up, buddy?
I was just going to be asking you about one of the favorite things in life, bacon.
Okay.
To how it should be cooked and
it's just not a good food. It's not a quality food. You know, you can eat whatever you want, but it's definitely not. There's no way to justify it as a quality food. Now, we like the salt, we like the fat, and to a certain extent the protein, but it's just not a quality food, period. If it's organic, it's a little bit better. If it's from quality pigs, if it's from, pigs that are raised correctly, not industrially farmed, obviously it's better. But when you're frying meat, you're just going to run into problems. And then if there's nitrates in there, then you can definitely run into problems. I've been talking about nitrates and nitrites as they are important parts of health, and they are indeed important parts of health, but not in bacon and not in processed meat.
Not like ham and anything like that.
Same deal. If it's organic, if it's the animals are treated correctly, not fed antibiotics and hormones, they're probably a little bit better. But with processed meats, and ham might be a little bit different. Bacon, sausage, these kinds of foods that you can't really identify what part of the animal they came from, you're best off being suspicious. Well, you got to ask yourself, why do we like those foods? Well, we like them because of the salt and the fat. The combination of salt and fat is absolutely impossible to resist, especially if you're fat deficient, in terms of good fat anyway, and salt deficient. And this is the reason why we like these kinds of foods. And by the way, the sugar in the bacon, and it's added to most bacon, brown sugar or whatever, honey, molasses, that compounds the problem. Between the sugar, the frying fats, the heated nitrates, it's just not a quality food.
Okay, and even if it's from a local...
It's better, absolutely better, and that's how you want to do most of your meat. Meat is just problematic. Shipping meat and storing meat and keeping it on the shelves, etc. That's not how meat is supposed to be eaten. That's not how the human body grew up from an evolutionary perspective. We didn't go to McDonald's from an evolutionary perspective. We didn't have processed meats. We didn't have, cured meats from an evolutionary perspective. We ate raw meat or we ate fresh meat. If it was cooked, it was fresh meat. Shipping and storing and making meat into a modern commodity, that's really where the problem comes from. And so there's no way to get around it. But yes, indeed, if you have a local farm and you know how the animal was raised, that's different. And there is some value to those kinds of food, but certainly not processed and chopped up and unidentifiable meat. That's definitely not a good food.
One
Bacon
thing related to it too, Ben, having it packaged in plastic.
That doesn't help you either. Absolutely, that's not a good thing either. So when all of that, the plastic's heated. You got all kinds of estrogenic compounds in plastic, BPA, etc. It's just not a quality way to eat. If you like the taste of it, that's different, and eat whatever you want to eat. But as far as quality food goes, it's hard to justify bacon as a quality food.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you so much. And I know I stepped on some toes there. Lately, it seems like everybody's just baking ice cream and baking candy, baking chocolate. It seems like bacon has caught on, and it is because of the combination of salt and sugar and oil, which human beings find absolutely irresistible. Uncle Jed, what's up? Good morning, Uncle Jed in Kentucky.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
We were talking last weekend. I called in twice late, right at the end of the show.
I remember.
Relating to nitrous oxide to some of the benefits of nitric oxides without a lot of the things, strangely enough. And we talked about several aspects of that. And I have a specific question after it, but we were talking about benefits. And can I tell you a few that I noted
Sure.
when I had done this? And again, to let everybody know, it was carefully done after an incredible amount of research. All I could find to read about all these subjects, including like we said, William James. We won't go back into that, but my benefits were connection to higher consciousness, what I call Holy Spirit.
Okay.
In the Christian context. And all the going to come from that. And the emotional healing. This is all found in the literature, too. You know that about the healing for things like addictions and childhood traumas from the therapy that was sort of recommended by William James. The physical healing, sometimes long-term, sometimes instantaneous. I had actual experiences of instantaneous
healing.
Healing.
Hang on, Uncle Jed. Let me ask something. Are you saying using nitrous oxide, you had spontaneous healing experiences?
Yes, sure did.
What did you heal?
I was suffering from a pull muscle torn nerve in my back, just below my left shoulder blade. Me and my children go out and skate and race and do physical things when I was there. We were younger. But anyway, I had a nagging nerve. I hadn't made the appointment with the chiropractor. You know, you have to find a good one. I didn't have one right at the time. But anyway, yes, I was in one of these states, and again in the communing state, and I felt a tingling just run up from the bottom to the top up toward my shoulder blade, where this had been nagging me for months and months. I mean, it was unpleasant. It wasn't just, it was there all the time, all my waking hours, and it's gone never to return.
And this is from inhaling nitrous oxide.
This was while inhaling
nitrous
oxide.
Fascinating.
Which leads me to, my real question is even more bizarre than any of this.
Okay.
And believe me, I had a lot of people with me watching them participate, but I'm the only one that took another step. And again, I did this safely, and it's going to sound, this is where you might lose me here a little bit, or I might lose you, I should say. But I got to the point of wondering about saturation. Now, I'm taking notation on all this stuff, afterwards, but I'm talking about how long and how intensely, because I began to, here, to back that up, I did it, just real quickly, I did pranayama since I was
well, you're going to have to tell the listeners, that's a breathing technique for the listeners, pranayama.
I did tons of breathing exercises, deep breathing, long breathing. I was up to, 24, 32 counts in, out, hold, all this kind of stuff. I would do walking meditation with breath for years and years. Lost 4 pounds in my waist, never took a faster step than a walk, and gained all kinds of clear head while I was doing it.
How did you do that? I'm still not understanding how you did the nitrous oxide. Did you do it with a tank and just inhaled it, and somebody watched you, or what's the deal?
No. This is you get. There are special respirators now for nitrous oxide. It's used in training divers against nitrogen narcosis. This is one of the points, because nitrogen narcosis, they make it sound like a bad thing. The only bad thing is you don't come up, you forget to breathe, you don't have air to get back up. So that's because you are in the most pleasant place you've ever experienced. You hear the voice of God. If you have a question, it's answered. The only reason this is dangerous is because people go into this blind and then they just suffocate, not because they're not conscious. They're doody-doo. They're having such a good time, it doesn't come up to them. And that's when some kid close himself.
They forget to breathe. They forget to breathe.
They forget to breathe. They don't think they need to, and they don't on certain
I'm going to need you, Uncle Jed, listen, my man, I got a commercial. I got a whole bunch of folks who need to get on the line here. I need you to sum up here. I'll let you sum up when we come back from our break, okay? But just sum it up in a couple sentences. Thanks a lot, Uncle Jed.
I want a question, and I got your question. That's all I ask.
All right, good deal. All right, we're going to take your, if you're on hold, hang tight. We'll finish up when we come back from a break with Uncle Jed, and then we'll take your calls as well. 844-236-6010 is our number. Okay, we are back on the bright side. Uncle Jed, sum it up in a couple of sentences, or if you have a question, what's up? We've got a bunch of calls here I want to get to.
You said you were talking about the people forgetting to breathe, which was the really the biggest and main danger of this. If you lock yourself in a closet or a small space like a car, you'll remove all the oxygen, and you will really totally forget to breathe. But here, because you'll never straighten out. You can straighten out in 30 seconds otherwise. Here's the thing. I didn't forget to breathe. I had people watching me. My system, you asked about that, was merely the biggest balloons I could find. there's a lot of reasons for that because
the biggest balloons. You're saying the biggest balloons? Did you say
balloon?
So you're breathing the stuff out of a balloon? Is that right?
Yes, I'm breathing pure nitrous oxide out of a balloon. Now, here's the observation in question. Oh, the fourth benefit, by the way, is faster reaction time, which explains a lot of relates to the athletic performance.
Okay.
But on and on like that, because you are now cogitating a higher level. I had to train myself to take notes. I had to train myself to write first. It took about 30, 45 seconds, probably in real time, to find out the right end of the pen, align it with paper, and how to form the notes. But I retaught that. But in the course of this, I breathe from these balloons. Now, you can say there's some migration. Breathe from the balloons, pure nitrous oxide from the E-tanks, observed by others. Breathed it for up to 2.5 hours or longer, under observation several times, did it many, many, many times, and I did not suffer suffocation, obviously. I was getting oxygen somewhere. And now, this is 100% nitrous oxide. I've triple-checked. They don't cut it with oxygen to make sure some fool doesn't kill himself. You see what I'm saying?
Okay,
but I did this for hours. And I want to know what you think. I released the oxygen. You know how you can release? Something in me released that oxygen.
If you maintain breathing... Uncle Jed, if you maintain correct breathing, if you make sure you're not losing, you're breathing correctly, I've never heard of 2.5 hours of breathing nitrous oxide. That's a first for me.
But that's the thing. I've got witnesses. I mean, I can't prove this because, it's something that's, controversial. But, I mean, I can prove because I could actually bring you or somebody to witnesses. Or
can you film it and do a YouTube or something? And can you do something like that?
I no longer have that kind of access. You understand?
Okay.
This was done about a decade ago. The use, like I say, has run since my early 20s. I was at university and did a lot of experimentation with it. When you could get the E-tanks without a whole lot of hassle. It's very important stuff, but when it goes on a restricted list, you can no longer deal with it. Well, I was able to for a while because I had a relationship with a medical facility. But it's 100%. Here's my point. It's 100%. I could be a liar. Nobody knows me. You don't know me. You got my number in your email if you ever want to.
Did you send an email? Did you send me an email, Uncle Jed?
Yes, I did. Uncle Jed, I think, is how I put that in the title.
You put that in the subject? Okay, I'm gonna give you a call because this might be a little over our listeners' heads, Uncle Jed, but I do want to talk to you because it sounds kind of intriguing, actually. So I'm going to let you go here. But I'm going to call you personally.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you personally. I think we might be going over our listeners' heads here a little bit, but I am fascinated. Thank you so much for your call, Uncle Jed. That is very, very interesting stuff there, and I hope we didn't bore anybody with that. Steve in Pennsylvania, what's going on, my friend?
Hi, Ben. Ben, I want to ask Almighty God to provide a hedge of protection around you.
Thank you.
And and all your friends and associates, and because what you're doing is so important.
I appreciate that, Steve. I think I know who you are. You and I have talked, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. How's it going, my man? How can we help you today?
Very good. I wanted to discuss the topic of the nitrites and nitrates.
Okay.
And also the second question is going to be the blockages and arterial blockages.
Okay.
When you go in to get a stent, one goes in to get a stent, and they put the test camera or whatever up the arm, and it gets to like a 90% blockage. But first of all, my uncle used to work for the Department of Agriculture, and he used to tell me that when he used to go in on the shelf, used to be bottles with a skull and a crossbones on them with nitrates, and he used to warn me about the nitrates. But now you're saying the nitrites. I'm sorry, not nitrates.
Nitrites are the active form of nitrates, yes. And they can be toxic, absolutely, because of this relationship to nitrosamines.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that there may be some health benefits. However...
I absolutely understand that, but that's what I wanted to get at.
Okay.
Anything. You could have one drop of that might be miraculous for health. But let me go a little bit further. Nitrogen is 81% of the atmosphere that we breathe. Every breath we take is 81%.
Okay.
Now, all the importance was on oxygen in the past. Okay, but what about the nitrogen? Nobody ever talks about nitrogen.
Well, that's because it's inert. It doesn't do anything. It's tied up in the atmosphere. So it's basically nothing. We can't use it. Nothing happens with it until bacteria start to process it. That's when it becomes activated. This is the importance of soil bacteria. They take inert. Inert is a fancy chemistry word which means blank. It doesn't do anything. It's inert. It's inactive. And bacteria have this amazing ability, and it is an amazing ability, to take this inert nitrogen gas and turn it into nitrates and nitrites. To turn it
nitrogen-fixing bacteria.
Correct. They call them
nitrogen. Legumes have that.
Exactly.
Or do other plants have?
Well, all plants, but
bacteria too.
Yes, all plants do, but legumes, for some reason or another, legumes are more associated. They may have more of these nitrogen-fixing bacteria.
You can purchase that bacteria. You can purchase that to inoculate your soil with all.
Absolutely, and you should, because it makes the soil rich. And one of the problems with pesticides and chemicals in the soil is these nitrogen-fixing bacteria are killed off by them. Also, antibiotics in the water, etc., have a tendency to kill off these nitrogen-fixing bacteria, and it's actually a big problem. By the way, vitamin B12 comes from the nitrogen-fixing bacteria as well. So nitrogen-fixing bacteria are a key to plant growth and ultimately a key to animal life, because animals eat the plants. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria, however, it's kind of an interesting subject, because one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century was an industrial process called the Haber process that duplicated the ability of bacteria to convert inert nitrogen into active nitrogen. This is where fertilizers, a lot of fertilizers, ammonia fertilizers come from these big factories that do exactly what these little tiny bacteria do, except they do it in a big industrial setting. And Fritz Haber, I think he won the Nobel Prize actually for developing the Haber process that duplicated in an industrial fashion what these little bacteria do, namely take nitrogen, inert nitrogen, which, as you say, is nearly 80% of our atmosphere, and make it into an active form. So nitrogen is tied up in the atmosphere as inert nitrogen, but bacteria can make it into active, usable nitrogen. And from that point forward, nitrogen is not inert, but it is an unbelievably explosive and important element for the health of plants and ultimately for the health of animals. And this is why protein is such a valuable food. Food stuff, because protein is basically a carbohydrate with nitrogen. It's a nitrogenated.
Active nitrogen? What is active nitrogen?
Active nitrogen is nitrogen that can be used by the body or used by plants, used by a living form. And bacteria convert inert nitrogen into a form that plants can use and a form that humans can use. How do we take advantage of this? Let me just say two more things here real quick. How do we take advantage of this? We eat more protein, and we eat more vegetables. Between protein and vegetables, this is where we get our nitrogen from. Ingested vegetables and ingested protein. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why vegetarians don't necessarily have to be skinny and scrawny. Sometimes you'll see vegetarians who are weightlifters or bodybuilders. There are football players who are vegetarians, and you say, how is it that they don't eat meat or they don't eat animal protein, but they are still big and strong? Well, they make sure that they're getting lots of nitrogen by eating plants, getting nitrates from plants. So if you're going to be a vegetarian and you want to build muscle and you want to build bone and you still want to be strong, make sure you're eating lots of nitrogen-containing vegetables, nitrate-containing vegetables, and we will talk about that, by the way, tomorrow. And I'll give you a clue. I'll give you a little hint. Popeye. Remember Popeye? What did Popeye eat to get big and strong? Did he eat hamburgers? No. That was wimpy. Did he eat steaks? No. Did he eat lots of meat and lots of eggs and lots of dairy to get strong? No, he ate spinach. Why? Because spinach is rich in nitrates, rich in nitrogen. This is one of the benefits of eating green leafy vegetables. In fact, there's another wonderful vegetable that's rich in nitrates that's actually being used it's being used synonymously with nitrates as a way of boosting nitrate levels in athletes and everybody else for that matter. And we'll tell you what that is tomorrow as we continue talking about the importance of nitrogen, nitrates and nitrites, and how we can best get them into our bodies. All right, got to move on. That's all the time we have for today. Steve, I apologize for, hope you didn't have, you had some heart blockage questions.
Yeah,
Steve, call me. Call me back tomorrow. We're out of time, buddy. I'm sorry.
Bye.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the kind words as well. All right, folks, thanks so much for listening to The Bright Side. I'm Pharmacist Ben. Have yourselves a wonderful, beautiful, spectacular day. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye for now.